Hello, my name is Rachel Benson and I live at Broadrake in Chapel-le-Dale, and we came here 8.5 years ago. Behind the buildings here is a field and we planted some trees, but I was inspired by the Haytime project run by the Yorkshire Dales Millennium Trust, so I wanted to keep an area for a wildflower meadow. The tutorial goes through the propagation methods that I've used to increase not only the number of wildflowers, but also the species. I hope you enjoy the tutorial and wish you every success. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take you through a guided tour of my seed collection. Firstly, when I started, some commercial seeds. And here we have DIY packaging, bits of old envelope, bits of paper just folded, stapled up, little envelopes for when I've cleaned the seeds. Here we have some that I've collected in the field or friends have collected for me. We swap seeds. Here are some clean seeds in the little brown packets. Quite a wide selection, mostly from Broadrake, or very local to us. And these are mostly from 2014, which when I started, nice and tidy. A few more from the last few years after that, getting a little bit less tidy and a little less reliant, the no idea plant. And here's my collection from 2019. Again with a view, collecting with a view this time to actually direct sow into the field this year, because it takes a lot of time to do the full plug planting, and some of these will germinate easily in the field. But there you are, there's a self-heal seed head with some seeds. Next to that, this lovely crested dog's tail fine grass, which is very lovely, and we have a lot of it here, but not necessarily in the meadow yet. Red campion, that's I've got a lot of that seed, that'll be for direct sowing. And my favourite seed to end on, wood crane's bill and some ribwort plantain. Most of the seed you've collected will fall to the bottom of the packets, and it'll just be a question of taking out the odd leaf and the seed head. For Devil's Bit scabious here, you'll need to tease out the little seed heads. Great Burnet comes with a lot of chaff. It doesn't really matter if you get a little bit of this left in with the seeds. Ribwort plantain, the seeds are held in a little husk on the head, and they just fall out if you rub them. The betony might be a little bit more tricky, so you may need to twist the seed head around to release the seeds. Wood crane's bill, normally you would collect this before the seed has used its release mechanism to ping the seeds out from the plant, and they'll still be inside those little husks, and they're quite tricky, but you need to squeeze them out. Put them in a packet and don't forget to label. I'm going to take you through the process we've used for sowing yellow rattleseed successfully at Broadrake in this short video. Ideally, you need somewhere bare of growth, so either somewhere where you've had a molehill, or you've taken a weed out, or you can turn a turf over. Dig out over the rooted area to make the surface even to sow things into. I did this last autumn. I had to scythe off the grass first, and then I sort of made a series of clearings along a path so I could see where I'd been. And you'll see it actually was quite successful Here it is in the spring, very dry now after all this drought, but the yellow rattle seedlings are now showing. I'm going to go through what I did just to show you how I sowed it into the edges of the turfs. I'm actually watering it here. This yellow rattle seed is not viable now, but I'm just going to demonstrate with it. So I open out the gap in between the grass and the bare area, so the seeds have some light to germinate into, and they can still parasitise off the grass. And I just do this in about 3 places around each bare area. Notice I'm firming it in, stop those pesky voles eating it. And this is what we're looking for again, just these little tiny crinkly first leaves showing. More direct sowing in the field, some grass and some plantain. Choose bare areas, or maybe in the centre of areas where you've sown your yellow rattle seed, and water it well after you've dug it over. For the crested dog's tail, I'm going to sow the complete seed head here, and I'm going to bury it. The chances are it might actually germinate if it was laid on the surface, if it was going to be wet. And ribwork plantain, shaking out the seeds that have gone to the bottom of the envelope, along with the chaff. Can stay in there, it'll just go in the ground, no problem. The ribwork plantain is very good for insects and an early flowering species. The compost mix we use at Broadrake has got 10 ml limestone chippings, a peat-free compost and some builder's sand in approximately equal quantities. But it's not an exact science. I just put them all together by eye and just give them a good mix in a bucket. Quite often people use horticultural grit, which is granite, but I don't see why we shouldn't use limestone in this area. Everything grows on limestone. Mix it in well and you will have a nice free draining compost with not too many nutrients. So now we're going to do some sowing. I'm going to do some hawkspit seedlings first. I'm using these large, deep, recycled, upcycled containers from tomatoes with a lid. They allow the roots to go nice and deep into the container, and there's a bit of space so they can grow upwards with you still having the lid on if it's through the winter. Just sprinkle these seeds onto the surface, and then we'll put a little covering of compost on top. Here's a woodpecker. Firm it down and add a layer of limestone chippings. This is useful in the winter when it stops the moss forming. It's not so necessary in the spring because they'll be growing on quite quickly. Write a label and date it. The lid is very useful, especially in the winter. This time I'm going to sow some slightly larger seeds, this time the wood cranesbill, and I'm going to dib a hole to space the seeds out, and I can get about a dozen in a little punnet like this. I'm trying to increase this lovely wood cranesbill into the meadow, and I've sown it, I think the first ones went in 4 or 5 years ago, and they still come up every year and disappear into nothing in the winter. I'm just going to cover the seeds by just knocking the whole tops back over, firming it in a little bit, adding some limestone chippings and giving it a water. And adding a label. And here we have some seeds that have germinated. The hawkspit was sown in February and the wood cranesbill was sown last November. Once your seeds have germinated and are showing 2 pairs of leaves, it's time to start thinking about pricking out. We use a variety of containers, the smaller ones obviously for smaller seedlings, some have deep roots. The bigger ones, I sometimes put 3 small seedlings in one of those. These little ones I'm using now for this bird's foot trefoil are quite sturdy. I'm just gently holding each seedling by a leaf, dipping a hole in the compost and easing that root gently down and then firming it in. The trouble with the smaller cells is you do have to make sure you water them because they'll dry out very quickly. So ideally store them somewhere in the shade through the summer. There's nothing worse than spending all this time to find that they shrivel up if you forget to water them if they're in the sun. This one's got an enormous root, look at that. Anyway, I'm going to sort of coil it up into the hole and ease it down. It'll be fine. Okay, I'm just going to add a few bits of limestone chippings onto the tray. Again, this will help stop it drying out quite as much. And then we'll give it a bit of a watering in, and then we'll put it in the shade. Here are some smaller seedlings that I pricked out a couple of weeks ago. Bird's eye primrose that I sowed in the autumn. Managed to get out the larger ones that had got 3 or 4 leaves and move them into these small cells. I'm just a bit nervous because they're so tiny, and the same with the fairy flax. Again, hardly even now showing their second pair of leaves, so I think I was a little bit early and hasty in pricking these out, but we'll see. I'll give it another few weeks and I'll maybe prick out the rest. Here's some ribwort plantain on the left hand side that I pricked out a couple of weeks ago, just beginning to get their 3rd leaf just showing up there. This is the bird's foot trefoil that I showed in the previous video. Just settling in nicely and starting to grow. These are seedlings I should have potted on last autumn, but I only got time to do half the punnet. They're going to make much smaller plants this year. There's a vetch here with a very long root, and you can actually still see the seed on the bottom of the root. Some salad burnet seedlings as well, and some very healthy plug plants, maybe 3 or 4 months further down the line, looking very healthy, ready for planting out. So in my greenhouse over the winter, I've had the seeds I sowed last autumn. Some of them are just starting to germinate. This is fairy flax, some very tiny seedlings, bird's eye primrose, and then going along there's quite a few things that haven't germinated yet. This is salad burnet, and we've got some cat's ear here. That was sown in February, in fact, that one. And on the right here we've got some bird's foot trefoil and some ribwort. And this one I have no idea because I haven't got a label. Hey ho. On this side I've got some sneezewort cuttings that I've just potted on, and some hoary plantain, and some self-heal, and a small wood cranes bit at the back there. And here's some more sneezewort cuttings that have not been potted on yet. Here's some hoary plantain, which is a lovely pale pink plantain with a scent, some small scabious, a purple vetch, very tiny seedlings there, and some meadow vetchling down here. I've also got some even smaller more scabious, and finally some rock rose, which is the first time I've sown this one. Behind the greenhouse I've laid out an area where I've sorted out the plug plants that are ready to go into the meadow. Here we have some columbine, some ragged robin, violets and some self-heal, some clover, red clover, some cowslips, which are very ready to go in. They're almost flowering. Some common violets, and some hoary plantain, meadow buttercup here, and finally some wood cranesbill. Once your pricked out plants have matured and built up a decent root system, it's time to think about plug planting. These have got very nice density of roots. I have got some other clovers here which are a bit pot bound. They'll just need the roots breaking out so they can find their own way in the ground. Once they're out of their cells, I put them in a bucket with some water so they get a really good soaking before they go in the field. And once we're in the field, where do we plant? If we can find bare areas or mole hills, or where you've taken a weed out, these are all good. So dig over the soil. I've actually added in some compost here, wet compost, because it was so dry, and I pre-watered the holes as well. These are meadow buttercups, so just pop them in the hole and make sure they're firmed in. Notice that I'm planting actually a group of 3 here. This is so that the pollinators, once they've found a flower that they like, they don't have far to fly before they find more of the same species. If it's very dry, it might be worth coming back a day or so later to have another water. You can also propagate by taking cuttings. This is sneezewort. If you take a non-flowering stem and put it around the outside of a pot of gritty compost and leave it over winter, it will develop some healthy roots. I potted these on and now they're doing really well this spring. The flower is really attractive to insects. You can also use leaf cuttings for cuckoo flower. The seed is tricky to collect. Just take a single leaf and place it in a box of compost, lay it down on its side and cover the end with compost and then grit, and hopefully it'll root. I've not tried it before, so we'll see. The cuckoo flower is a food plant for the lovely orange tip butterfly. Plant division works really well with melancholy thistle. Simply take one of the outer clumps and dig out a square of earth around it and then replant it. It will then increase by its roots. Here on this little rocky patch of mossiness and a few, how I say it, Spanish bluebells, I have a whole host of cuckoo flowers coming out that spread themselves into the garden, into the lawn, all on their own. So I'm going to capitalise on that. Just pinch a few bits before Mike gets the lawnmower out. Do you think you'll notice?